Good evening and welcome to the Nightmorgue. Now this podcast is designed to explore all things horror. Horror movies, horror series, horror stories. Even ghosts and their ghost stories. For all things horror, please tune in to the Nightmorgue. In what better way than to start our podcast is by exploring the latest horror movie by Robert Eggers, Nosferatu. So this movie has recently came out in the United Kingdom. It came out on New Year's Day. Unfortunately, we've had to wait a slight bit longer because I do believe it came out overseas on Christmas Day. And although it is a shame that we've had to wait a slight bit longer, there's no better way to ring in the new year than watching Nosferatu. I'm not going to make any secret of it. I loved this movie by Robert Eggers. I mean, Robert Eggers himself, he is a talented and fantastic filmmaker. He has never made a bad movie yet. I mean, The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman, and now this. Each one a visual treat to the eyes and a thought-provoking movie. So Nosferatu, for those of you who do not know, was actually a remake of the 1922 silent black and white horror movie. I mean, the original itself is famous for being one of the most ultimate bootleg movies of all time. So, in F.W. Murano in 1922, before they made it actually, what they wanted to do, they actually wanted to make a film about Dracula. Because, you know, at the time, Dracula was a very popular novel. But the rights and royalties were still held by the Stoker family at the time. So they decided to make a movie, but to avoid paying any royalties to the Stoker estate, they changed details to kind of make sure that even though it resembled the original novel of Dracula, it wasn't. So, I mean, this one, you know, they set it in Germany. It isn't actually Count Dracula, it's actually Count Orlok. All the characters' names were changed to try and avoid paying royalties. I mean, unfortunately in this case, nobody was fooled, and of course the Stoker estate took the filmmakers to court, and all copies was actually ordered to be destroyed. However, fortunately, some copies did survive, and hence why we're able to see the classic to this day. For anyone who's not seen it, please go and watch it. It is horror history and cinematic history. But again, it's such a fascinating story when you think about it. I mean, the character of Dracula and how they've actually adapted it. So this movie is actually a remake. This is the third remake of Nosferatu. It's the remake of the original classic 1922 black and white silent cinematic masterpiece. Which is kind of amazing. The fact is, the original 1922 is actually not only one of cinema's most iconic horror movies, but it's also its most ultimate bootleg movie of all time. So Dracula, the original novel, when it first came out, and even to this day, it's still unbelievably popular. The most famous vampire story of all time. But at the time of 1922, the rights to Bram Stoker's novel still lay with the Stoker estate. So for anyone who actually wanted to adapt the book, would have to pay royalties to the Stoker estate to actually do this. But at the time, filmmaker F.W. Murnau, based on a script from Henry Gelin, actually found a way to actually make a movie to try and avoid paying the royalties. So what they actually did to avoid paying these royalties, they changed details of the story. Whereas, you know, the classic novel Dracula, this is set in England, Whitby, Carfax Abbey. So this was changed to Germany. All the characters' names were changed, and the character of Count Dracula was changed to Count Orlok to avoid all confusion, and of course to avoid paying royalties. However, this was not very successful, and of course when the Stoker family found out they did indeed take the filmmakers to court, and the judge ruled in favour of the Stoker estate and ordered that all copies of Nosferatu were to be destroyed. Fortunately, a few copies has survived and is now still watchable, which has given us all a chance still to watch this iconic masterpiece even to this day. I mean, the original masterpiece is fantastic. I mean, that shot we see Orlok's shadow creep up the stairs, it's the stuff of legend and the stuff of nightmares, and even to this day it still looks absolutely fantastic. So Robert Eggers has always cited the original as a major influence upon his filmmaking. The atmosphere, the look, the feel. Originally, Eggers actually wanted to make this film a lot sooner, Nosferatu. After making The Witch in 2015, he did consider making this as his second adaptation film he wanted to do. However, at the time, he didn't feel like it was right. It was only his second movie, so he didn't actually feel it was right, quoting actually, it seemed blasphemous that he would make it as his second movie, so instead he opted to make The Lighthouse, with the eye for always wanting to make Nosferatu again. I mean, originally, I believe in August 2017, Anya Taylor-Joy was originally cast, actually. But then again, this was back in the day when, they were still within talks of making the movie. I believe Harry Styles was briefly attached to the movie at one point. Even for the character of Orlok, I know there were names such as Daniel Day-Lewis, Mads Mikkelsen thrown around. I think even for a time, I believe William Dafoe was actually slated to play the role, although he is ironically in this movie, but just not as Orlok. But the thing I'll go straight out there about this movie, I am not going to lie. When it comes to Robert Eggers' movies, I'll be a bit biased on this one. He hasn't made a bad movie yet. I mean, I love The Witch, I love The Lighthouse, and I love The Northman. So The Witch is a New English American folklore horror story. Fantastic. The Lighthouse, I'm not sure if I'm watching two men slowly go mad on a deserted island due to the isolation, or if I'm watching some parable to Greek myth. And as for The Northman, it's an epic saga ripped straight from Norse mythology, which is brutal and ruthless, but still as majestic as hell. And as for Nosferatu, I've got to be bold when I say this, but I actually think, for me personally, I mean, whether anyone agrees with me or not, maybe they do, maybe they won't, but I actually think this is probably his best movie he's done. Because everything about this movie, I absolutely loved. The cinematography, wow. The cinematography, how it looks, how it's shot, is absolutely stunning. It's absolutely fantastic how it's actually shot. I mean, the film was shot on 35mm film in colour by cinematographer. I'm probably going to get his name wrong, so I do apologise. But Jarin Blaschke, which, again, what he did, which I noticed, which worked fantastically with the theme and also added to the, the gothic nature of the movie. It had a much more of a desaturated look. So as the movie progressed, the colour became less and less prominent, looking more desaturated, giving it that grey, dreary, oppressive feel, which worked absolutely fantastic to really create that gothic horror story. This, as the characters sink further into despair, you as the viewer, seeing the colour palette slowly drain of the world, kind of feel that despair with them. The visuals. It is shot on location, so principal photography did actually start in the Czech Republic. I believe it took place in Barrandov Studios in Prague. I do know they did do a lot of shooting at, again, I'm probably going to pronounce this horribly wrong, so again, I do apologise, but there was a castle in Rozmytel, so it's Rozmytel pod Tremsinem Castle. Again, I do apologise if I probably butchered that word, so I possibly have. And they did a lot of exterior shots in Corvin Castle in Romania. It was absolutely shot. The film looks beautiful, from the quaint Germanic town to the isolated Carpathian mountains to the very dark and gruesome looking shot of the Count's castle, which, as soon as you see that castle, you think, wow, that actually looks where hell itself is. It looks actually quite creepy, the castle does, and you think, actually, that's where I could believe something like this creature would live. It is, as I said, from a cinematographic point of view, it is shot absolutely beautifully. The cast. Let's talk about the cast. So, as I said, initially there was quite a few actors chucked in, Anya Taylor-Joy, Mads Mikkelsen, Daniel Day-Lewis, but the cast, what we've got here is Lily Rose Depp. She plays Ellen. You've got Nicholas Hoult, who plays her husband Thomas. You've got Ralph Ineson, who plays the good doctor. I believe his name is, what's his name again? Wilhelm Schivers. And of course, Willem Dafoe plays Professor Albin Eberhard von Franz, a Swiss philosopher. Although this is kind of pretty much the movie's Van Helsing. Corinne Hardy plays Anna Harding, and Aaron Taylor-Johnson plays Frederick Harding. Again, Anna's husband is based on the character of Arthur Homewood. And let's not forget the most iconic character in the movie, Count Orlok, which in this one is played by Swedish actor Bill Skarsgård. So all the cast here absolutely solid, with a real standout to Lily Rose Depp and Bill Skarsgård. So Lily Rose, she's the daughter of Johnny Depp. She is absolutely fantastic in this movie. She plays, as you say, she's the main heroine. And what's interesting about her character is that delicate vulnerability about her. The fact is, she's this vulnerable character that's wanting to live a life, but it seems that no matter what she's done, she's vastly ignored, Her bouts of what they deem as melancholy, they deem it just pure melancholy. She's often ignored. And as the movie progresses, that's when more and more people start to take notice of her, and her real strength does come through. She gives a fantastically haunting performance as Ellen. You actually feel for the character. She's brilliant. I mean, absolutely great. She has great chemistry with all the cast. Now, Bill Skarsgård as Count Orlok. Wow. Absolutely perfectly cast. I mean, Bill Skarsgård, we all know he's no stranger to horror. He's in Barbarian. He was recently in the Crow remake, although the less we talk about the Crow remake, the better, I do believe. And he was also, most famously, Pennywise in It. Again, hard role to take over, especially after the iconic Tim Curry, but again, he made his Pennywise absolutely brilliant. But of all the movies I've seen Skarsgård in, I'm going to have to go straight out there and say, I believe Count Orlok is his best work. So, when we see the original Nosferatu, and we see the character of Count Orlok, as you say, when we think of vampires, we all think of vampires as being like these handsome, alluring people, these tragic characters, these good-looking people, that seduce and bring people to them. But when you see the character of Orlok, in the original one, it's quite an ugly, grotesque creature when you see him. He's got like this goblin-esque kind of like appearance. He's bald-headed. You've got these pointy ears, the pointed nose, the long claws, the teeth. And he's quite a hideous looking character. But when I see him in this one, I mean, originally he was played by Max Schreck, again, played iconically. And again, in 1979, I believe he was played indeed by William Dafoe, I believe, actually. Let me just check on. Yes, he was played by William Dafoe. And for this one, Bill Skarsgård, the design of Count Orlok in this movie, he looks grotesque. Everything about him looks and feels grotesque. So how they've designed him, they've not designed him as like this, foreboding, handsome count. He is pretty much a rotting corpse. This is actually paying homage to the original vampirific myth. So, in the legends and myths of vampires were more or less the Walking Dead. Strigoi. They were mainly called Strigoi. So these would actually be the dead, or the corpses in this case, that would raise up and drink from the blood of the living. But when they had done this, they'd actually decided to base him on this. So again, when they've done it, they've based him on this proper one. Skarsgård himself, he actually lost some weight. And he also worked with an Icelandic opera singer. I believe the name was Askua Jonistadottir. But again, if I'm butchering their name, I apologise in advance. So the reason why he's worked with him, because when you hear the voice of Count Orlok, it's quite this deep Hungarian drone, like this really deep, domineering presence. The voice is quite deep, it's quite, and I wouldn't say raspy, but like someone who you believe doesn't speak the natural language. Like he spoke, like you can imagine someone from who speaks an ancient tongue coming to him. The look, as I said, he is a rotting visual corpse, and that works perfectly for this movie. He looks and he generally feels repulsive. And what I also like this, and again, I'm probably going to say something that's probably a bit controversial here, but when it comes to vampire movies, I've often found vampire movies quite stale. It's not that I don't like vampire movies, but the problem is I've been struggling to really kind of see where we can kind of go in more vampire movies, because they all seem to be quite samey. I've not seen a horror movie that's really scared me in terms of vampires. Don't get me wrong, there was Abigail last year, fantastic film. But did it scare me? No. 30 Days a Night, did I love it? Yeah, I like 30 Days a Night, but wasn't scary. Lost Boys, Fright Night, again, weren't frightening as such. But I actually started to think the vampire genre was getting stale in that respect. And then, of course, when they brought Twilight and the vampires that sparkled, I did love What We Do in the Shadows. I kind of like they actually played fun with the vampires in there. But this one, I do say what they did, they don't... It's kind of weird because they don't really what you call reinvent the vampirific wheel, but what they do, they decide to reset it. And they go back to the original basics of what vampire actually was. So, and this is where Bill Skarsgård character kind of differs in there. The fact is, this isn't like some ancient figure that's kind of like mourning and kind of like lamenting their eternal life. This man is a beast. This tree is just an animal, an apex predator. He doesn't care about people. All he cares about is his next feed. And that's what I kind of liked about it. He's menacing, he's cruel, he's domineering. And unlike some characters, look at, say, Bram Stoker's Dracula, for example. Again, recently with Francis Ford Coppola. Gary Oldman's performance is legend. He is a human chameleon in form, but when we see his character Dracula, it's actually more of a sympathetic character, The fact is, he's portrayed in a more sympathetic light. Dracula Untold. He's not become Dracula to become, this, I want to rule the world. No, I want to save my people. So again, they give him this more, sympathetic, understanding role. But what I like about Bill Skarsgård's Orlok is there is nothing redeeming about him. This isn't a good character. This isn't a nice man. This isn't a tragic character. This isn't some being that's lamenting his eternal life. This is actually an evil creature. Just, there's nothing about him. There's nothing redeeming. He is the worst. And the look, the feel is repulsive. And I think they work with that fantastically. And to be honest, as I'm still going to repeat again, to be honest, I actually think this is probably Skarsgård's best role. And for anyone who's seen Nosferatu, I hope you agree with me on that one. Because everything about this film, the cast, they work solidly. His scenes with Lily Rose Depp is absolutely brilliant. It's kind of like a nice counteraction. I really hope in her case, she's quite a young, she's a young actress and she's upcoming, and I believe, looking at this one, I can see her easily getting a good, promising career. I mean, Nicholas Hoult, again, absolutely fantastic. He's a guy that's up on the rise. Aaron Taylor-Johnson, fresh off the back of Craven the Hunter. Poor guy. And William Dafoe. I mean, William Dafoe, again, I love William Dafoe. He's brilliant. If he wasn't Nosferatu, he would have been he's perfect as the Van Helsing equivalent. And of course, mainstay Ralph Ineson. Again, he's got a good, promising career ahead of him. I do believe he has been cast as Galactus in the latest Fantastic Four again. So, good, promising career, good northern voice, and quite a mainstay when it comes to Robert Eggers. So, the film's story. So, it is a couple of hour movie. It is, I think, I believe it is just over 2 hours mark, or is it 2.5 hours? Let me just check. So I remember when I watched it, it was at, you know, the film, like, one thing I did notice what one person had said, actually, because when I came out of the cinema, actually, at the time, I actually was talking to a couple of people outside of the cinema at the time, actually, and it was just over, it is just over 2 hours, 132-minute mark. This was actually interesting, because it was more of a younger person who was saying this, and they were actually saying, actually, I thought the movie was a bit slow. And I suppose, in a sense, the film does have that bit of a slow build-up to begin with, but personally, I actually didn't mind the slow build-up in this case, because it kind of built that tension. It explored the characters. Like, good thing about this movie is none of the characters felt rushed, none of the characters felt neglected. All the characters were utilised perfectly, and the set and tone was used perfectly. I mean, there's one sequence, actually, that, as I said, this is a non-spoiler kind of aspects, but there's one sequence that was actually inspired by the Phantom Carriage. Now, this sequence, I'm not going to lie, is probably my most favourite sequence in the movie. This was pretty much where the movie was at that slow rolling start, and at that point, it hit the gas. And it hit the gas in such a way that, I mean, this sequence is fantastic. I mean, it's black, like the colours, the lights, the music, and just the visuals. And I'm watching it going, oh my Jesus God, this is where, you know, you want to say to the character, run, turn back, just run, get out of there, just don't. And you're like, wow. I mean, the music score, absolutely fantastic. It fits like this, similar to the Bram Stoker's Dracula with Francis Ford Coppola. You know, it's got that operatic, it's got that, you know, dark oppressiveness, and it just fits perfectly with the movie. It doesn't domineer it. It just has that nice counterbalance to it. But all I can say when it comes to this movie, if there's any criticisms to this movie, I can't think of any criticisms personally. I know some people have said it is a bit slow for them, which, again, I can understand where they're coming from, but for me, I kind of like that slow build up there. It is, as I said, just over the 2 hour mark, but I do know that when we do get the eventual physical media release, there is going to be an extended cut on there, which I do believe might possibly take it to 3 hours. However, in terms of what scenes are being extended, I'm not 100% certain, but all I can say is I do hope we see more scenes with Count Orlok. Because I wouldn't say he's underutilised. I think he's used perfectly in the movie, but every scene that he is in is absolutely astounding. I'd love to see more of this. I mean, it's brilliant. I mean, I'm a man who don't like rats. I wouldn't say I'm scared of rats, but I just don't like rats in general. But there are a few sequences with large amounts of rats, and I wouldn't say I was uncomfortable, but let's just say I was shifting about in the cinema chair a little bit too uncomfortably. But yeah. So in terms of out of 10, so I always like to give my movies a rating out of 10. You know, like, is it with 1 being the worst, in 10 being the highest? So I'm going to say my 2025 has really cracked off with a bang. And I'm happy to give this movie a 10 out of 10. As I say, what stands out for me, perfect cast, perfect cinematography, Robert Eggers' direction's absolutely phenomenal. I really can't wait to see what he does next. And I do believe in this case, I think this film will stand the test of time and become one of the most iconic horror films of this decade, of any luck. I mean, there's so much about this film like it's giving that 10 out of 10. Like, some of the horror visual imagery you've seen, I mean, what's also interesting about this movie, which also earned it, like, when you think of vampire movies, you kind of think of these, like, attractive vampires, you know, like, there's that sexual undercurrent, you know, you think of, like, you know, Interview with the Vampire, you know, Queen of the Damned, From Dusk Till Dawn, and then you've got, you know, Bram Stoker's Dracula. But what's interesting about this movie is there is a psychosexual theme within this movie, but what makes this film brilliant about it is repulsive. It's wrong. It doesn't feel right. It feels absolutely repulsive. It's not like, oh Jesus God, oh no, this is wrong. It doesn't feel right. And just like the character of Orlok, it is an unnatural thing. It does feel unnatural. It feels wrong. It feels unnatural. And it creates that repulsive horror there, which works perfectly for this movie. So for anyone who's not seen it, I'm going to say this. I'm happy to recommend this movie. And I'd say, please watch it. Please enjoy it. And I hope you like it as much as I do. Let me know what you think. I'd like to thank you all for your time tonight. And I can't wait to return with more. So, for the meantime, please tune into my channel and stay spooky. Good night.